Bristol.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for granting me this opportunity for this adjournment debate. I'm also grateful to the Minister for coming to the House to respond. Fly tipping is an issue that blights too many of our communities. It happens in cities, it happens in towns, it happens in the countryside. Those dumping range from selfish individuals to criminal operators, but the effect is the same. The law-abiding suffer. On private land, the law-abiding are made to pay. Peterborough is a proud city. My constituency also takes in the Fens around Eye, Thorney and Newborough. So I see fly tipping in all its forms. And quite frankly, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've had enough of it. The people of Paston, the people of Bretton, Warrington, Ravensthorpe and Millfield have also had enough. At the 2019 election, I put tackling fly tipping at the very top of my list of priorities. And some argued that this was a local council issue, but I make no apology for demanding action. And I know that Peterborough City Council are working hard to tackle this, but we all need to do more to help, and this includes the government. Indeed, I am regularly reporting fly tips as I walk around the streets of Peterborough, and even on several occasions I've rolled up my sleeves and cleared the fly tips up myself. The village of Newborough regularly has to put up with fly tips and mess on roads and around the community. The junction of Norwood Lane and Newborough Road is a particularly bad hotspot, with I think many election candidates went to visit in the run-up to the 2019 Peterborough by-election. Rubbish piles up high, and many have stories of travelling for miles to dump rubbish in this spot. It costs Peterborough City Council tens of thousands to clear up, and even the Daily Mail called it the most fly-tipped road in Britain. But this does not just stop in rural locations. In the city of Peterborough itself, we are sick and we are tired of people making our neighbourhoods dumping grounds. People have even said to me, seeing fly tips, especially during the isolation of lockdown, affected their mental health. Now, the council do a good job and often clear up after 24 hours. But people are beginning to think that this is almost a service. We need more CCTV and we need stricter fines. And I could talk for hours about specific problems in Peterborough, but I want to return to the overall picture and what at a national level I feel the government should be doing about it. Because there are three acknowledged drivers of fly tipping, large and small. Cost. Dumping waste means not having to pay for it. Facilities, which can be sometimes difficult to access. And attitude. The lazy and the selfish who want to make their waste somebody else's problem. But I would add a fourth driver to that, acceptability. When people regularly see fly tips, some people think it's acceptable. Almost half of recording fly tips occur on pavements and roads, and these are often the copycat offenders. Certain locations become hotspots where fly tipping becomes the norm. I will refer to private land, which the figures don't properly capture. What I'm talking about now, though, are the cases that are recorded by councils. Because a third of cases are the equivalent to a small van load, which are often little white vans of illegal operators. And another third would apparently fit in the boot of a car or less. That's the description within our official statistics. I don't know whether our statisticians regard a mattress as fitting a car boot, but they are definitely amongst the most common items that I see dumped in my city. And when they are dumped and aren't removed, other people take the opportunity then to add their own rubbish. The mattress is joined by a broken buggy, a dilapidated table, an old fridge, boxes and bags. And as the council's contractors will be coming anyway, well, why not? It beats the hassle and cost of going to the tip or arranging a proper collection. But that's why, Madam Deputy Speaker, I believe we should alter our approach, and that, especially in the terms of antisocial behaviour and like it to that, and I call it zero tolerance. Now, obviously, innovations help, advertising dates for bulky waste collection, making access to other facilities and services would help. But above all, we need a quick removal blitz on hotspots and proper punishment. Now, I do want to acknowledge that the government recognises there's a problem. I welcome previous actions and particularly the introduction of fixed penalty notices for small offences, along with the power to seize vehicles. The ability for a householder to be fined if waste can be traced back to them was an important change. The Environment Agency has also been given more funding, but an emphasis on localism and local approaches mustn't become an excuse. It may be tempting to think that fly tipping is now down to local authorities to combat, but what they need is the right guidance, the right support and the right tools, and those are still limited. Nor is the work to secure tougher penalties in place, and nor is there a zero-tolerance approach being promoted or being resourced. So we can't say it's just down to councils. It's not clear to me that any council has had notable success on this. The reality is that fly tipping is with us just as much as ever, and it appears to be getting worse. Of course.
Thank him for giving way, and he's making an important point, so I congratulate him on bringing this debate forward. It's very important. I'm sure he agrees with me and around the chamber that one of the pressures on local authorities has been there's been a significant increase during lockdown of people fly tipping because of the inability to access recycling and other centres. Does he agree with me, however, that the cost to local authorities such as Warwickshire, £650,000, when budgets are already under huge pressure, is just too much?
He does make a very important point about the national lockdown and the impact that this has had, and the cost associated with clearing up these fly tips. And I'll come on to those specifics, because the national lockdown has had very different effects, and unfortunately, life is far from back to normal. But my own anecdotal evidence in Peterborough doesn't lead me to expect any drop in numbers of fly tipping over that time. If anything, the reverse is actually true, of course.
I think he's making a very important point about how the attitudinal change has changed during lockdown. Has been picked up by the honourable member opposite as well. The people of Muggleswick, Weardale and Nixley in my constituency have seen huge increases during lockdown. And does he feel like I do, that unless we see a change to this attitudinal change, which has been driven by lockdown, that we're going to see this problem persist well into the future?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. I mean, if anything, I think the problem has got worse. A survey that sampled councils in August suggested that over half are experiencing higher volumes of fly-tipped waste. The possibility was foreseen in the government's own pandemic guidance, actually, to councils in April, which noted the potential for increased fly-tipping, especially for the collections fail. Rightly, of course.
Interrupt him while he's making progress. But in my own constituency, around Totnes and Dartmouth, we've seen a significant increase in fly tipping, but there has also been a problem with access to recycling centres. And finding that balance between being able to get that access to prevent people from littering the countryside and ruining our very historic areas of outstanding natural beauty.
Again, he makes an incredibly important point. In Peterborough, my experience is that fly tipping dropped almost by a quarter when a new super recycling centre was opened, and huge progress was made. But I fear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that a lot of that progress has been lost. There is also a clear distinction between clearing fly tips and enforcement, and I hope the LGA is wrong when it includes the unfortunate reality is that enforcement will not be prioritised at this time, and this is likely to have a long-term impact on waste management services. Sometimes evidence is actually easy to find. One fly tip on a site of a local Peterborough business was traced actually back to a Peterborough City Labour councillor. Not because they started routing through the fly tip in particular, it's because of the enormous Vote Labour poster that featured in front and centre of the fly tip. But to his credit, the councillor in question, the family of the councillor in question, cleared the mess up personally when it was pointed out to them that it might be a decent thing to do. And it was revealed that they had paid an unlicensed trader to dispose of it. And unfortunately, this is becoming too much of a business for people who would profit on this disreputable way of clearing rubbish. One positive this year, though, was the budget in which the Chancellor announced £2 million to improve evidence on where fly tip happens and the best ways to deter it. I would welcome an update from the Minister on how that work is progressing. The law makes fly tipping a criminal offence. The sentencing guidelines were updated several years ago. They allow courts to hand out a maximum of £50,000 or a maximum sentence of 12 months. The problem is, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this rarely happens. To date, there have only ever been a handful of maximum fines issued to fly-tipped criminals. And, of course. I accept what the honourable gentleman is saying, and in fact, I think a lot of this problem comes down to guidance. I think council should be given much clearer and much stricter guidance from government in order to tackle those issues. And I'm just going to mention that at the very end of my speech, which I promise members is coming to an end soon. Some 95% of sentences issued are fines of less than £1,000, and the most common penalty is £400. We badly need tougher sentences, not just in terms of the maximum punishments, but more importantly, in terms of those typically handed out. Sentences are not, as current, acting as a deterrent. Now, I know government is committed to reviewing the sentencing guidelines. I also appreciate that it's not directly in DEFRA's hands, but I hope the Minister can give some reassurance that these are coming, and soon. The Council's ability to hand out fixed penalty notices is limited to the less serious offences, but they still managed to issue 76,000. However, only 12,000 were for small-scale fly tipping. That compares to 37,000 for littering, 26,000 for other offences. It comes back to the ability to catch people and the willingness to enforce. And this, I feel, is where the guidance needs improving. If an aggrieved constituent examines the government's guidance entitled Fly Tipping Council Responsibilities, they'll find nothing resembling the zero-tolerance approach that I feel we need. I want to see a much tougher approach, and I'm sure this is shared by many honourable members of this House. But much of this needs guidance from the centre. Guidance was issued for local authorities on household waste, duty, care, fixed penalty notices was updated in December 2018. This guidance does encourage what it calls a proportionate response and says individuals should not be penalised for minor breaches. I understand why this is in there, especially when we're dealing with vulnerable people, but I think the tone and the language is unhelpful. I would want guidance to reflect the language of zero tolerance, which I believe the people of Peterborough and the rest of the country are crying out for. Fixed penalty notices, as they stand, are inadequate. When the minimum penalty is just £150, many unlicensed traders, individuals, landlords would consider this a penalty worth taking a risk for. The level of fines should be considerably higher. Upping these penalties may require legislation, but I urge ministers to consider doing this, and doing so they would have the overwhelming support of the people of Peterborough and indeed members of this House.
Dr. Kieran Mullen.